Thank you, Lloyd. My name is Paige Medill, and today I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Fletcher about the Constitutional Convention. Hi. Before we discuss the convention, would you be able to tell me a little bit about your background and what motivated you to represent your community as a delegate?
Absolutely. Well, so my professional background is actually rooted primarily in human health, from sports medicine, a career in nursing, spanning numerous roles across healthcare systems. I discovered Cardano's ecosystem in late 2019, early 2020, and my journey into blockchain and crypto actually started just a short time earlier. I believe my interest in research backed development across many fields is what really led me to Cardano. I was hooked, actually, pretty much from the start, by the mission, the vision, and purpose. I started running Carpool, Stake Pool in 2021, and have been involved in several projects as well as education initiatives in my local community. And then I've been co hosting Cardano workshops and summits in the Pacific Northwest of North America with the team from Salmon Pool for over 3 years now. Shout out to Nori, Jeremy, and Brian, and all the participants from the region who attend those events. Uh, in honesty, I'd been so busy with my sole focus was on the constitutional workshop and the preparation, as well as just studying it for myself. It wasn't actually until about an hour before that workshop that Nori made a comment, I think kind of pondering out loud about who the delegate and the alternate might be from our workshop, that I realized that that was going to happen. And I hadn't considered it previously. Over the next few hours, though, I came to the decision to put my name in the hat. Um, I love this community. I love what we're all striving for. And I wanted to represent the voices of all the participants that I'd come to know over those previous 3 years of the events.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is so interesting. What would you say your most memorable moment from the Constitutional Convention was, and has it changed or shaped your understanding of collaborative governance?
Choose a
Take your
most
time.
memorable moment. I know there's quite a few. It was a very special time.
Yeah.
Uh, I think a most memorable moment for me, and key A, because there were multiple, was the confirmation of the vote that took place when each of the delegates stood, naming their country and the community that they were speaking on behalf of, and announcing their vote. That actually brought me to tears. It wasn't a cerebral moment at all. It was pretty much all in my heart, in my chest. I felt this. The body, the scope of this body of the community across the entire globe. It was big and it was stretching in my chest, bringing tears of awe with it. Um, that doesn't quite address the second part of your question about shaping my understanding,
Amazing.
but it certainly deepened my admiration and appreciation for all involved.
Absolutely. That is so beautiful. Um, During the convention, delegates achieved uh, a remarkable consensus on several different issues. Is there, again, hard to pick A, I'm sure, but is there a specific instance of where you saw all the diverse perspectives come together really well?
Yeah. Um, Instead of sharing a specific instance, I'd almost rather share a specific observation about those instances
Absolutely.
because there were numerous. In those moments, despite our differences, there was an underlying respect for each other's different perspectives and an appreciation for that, as well as a recognition of that shared commitment that was present to arrive at the best document we could possibly, um, put together. And without this shared sense of duty, purpose, and respect, I don't know if we could have come together effectively.
That's a really good observation. I think you're absolutely right. Um, how did you manage to maintain active communication with your constituent community throughout the convention? And I'm sure they provided many insights, but are there any that stand out to you in particular?
Both are. the delegate as well as myself as the alternate. We used some of the community tools, such as the CGov tool to receive input from our constituents, um, as well as direct chat channels through Discord and Signal, which we created at the time of and shortly after our workshop in the Pacific Northwest from Vancouver, Canada. Some of them also had our direct contact information because of the years of relationship building, that we had formed there in that community. The insight, I think, and just the conversation in general, the being able to check in, it was grounding. It helped in moments when we kind of needed that ability or that extra help to zoom out, really, because we would get so immersed into particular topics, within the various conversation groups and things that were taking place, both inside session within the delegates and outside of session. Every lunch, every break, before breakfast or at breakfast and during dinner, we'd be so deeply into this stuff that actually that perspective outside would kind of help us zoom out and take a refreshing look at things.
It's so helpful that the community is so large and so diverse. Absolutely. So many different perspectives. The convention implemented really innovative consensus building techniques like temperature checks. How did these influence the quality of discussion and decision making that happened?
um, well, there were times when this was helpful, and there were times when it maybe seemed a little laborious, as some of the jokes and memes that came out of some of those pieces. I think the primary challenge really with the techniques was there was, again, another observation on my part, a gap in understanding in the formal process of how these all fit. So there were moments where there was confusion, and the gaps, I think, really created like a concern, almost a bit of angst, as um, our facilitator, as Lloyd, was trying to give us the confidence to move forward in certain cases, but there was, without really understanding how some of those pieces were really meant to fit and support the process, there was a bit of tension there around some of those pieces. So while I think it did add value, I think just this whole process being new to everybody, it also came as a little bit of a mixed experience.
Absolutely. There's always a learning curve. So now you know what'll work better for next time, hopefully. Looking back at the process, what would you say surprised you most about working with delegates from different cultural and geographic backgrounds? Is there anything that surprised you?
Yes, well, first, I love surprise, and there's always something one can be surprised about. I think for me, some of that really came in the form of just listening deeply, hearing how, here in America, um, our experience of blockchain and crypto is quite different, where it's still largely secondary to a legacy system or a core financial system that we all use and rely on. Whereas in a number of our community members from other geographical areas, it's actually used as one of their primary. They have, circumstances where they have adopted it much earlier in a much more robust way, and so their perspective was really uh, impactful to hear, and the depth of their sincerity, their concern, just the just feeling into that, I think, was what really surprised me. Of like, we want to arrive there. I think about it often. I go through these thought experiments with those who are willing to entertain that kind of conversation with myself, or people in our community, and it just added a great uh, um, a richness to um, the conversation. Seeing where we're really going, folks who are already being impacted in that substantial way in their everyday life.
Absolutely. That is the beauty of these conventions. You've already touched on this a little bit, but would you be able to describe challenges that maybe you encountered during the convention and how you and other delegates worked to overcome them?
Sure. The I think the greatest challenge, maybe there would be a large agreement on this was time. I think the feeling the press of time um, to arrive at this significant document. I don't think it was lost on anybody how important it was, and so that challenge, that bit of feeling of pressure, created the challenges of just, we could only pay attention to so much at any given time. Some of the ways that I saw that being skillfully worked through was, there was often, again, as I previously touched on, for those days leading up to the signing, every moment outside of the formal sessions, during the formal sessions, every break, every lunch, every dinner, into the evening, places where there would be social conversation, it largely centered around these points of challenge or contention, of different perspectives of how to address something. And actually, there was a lot of fruit came from those conversations, and I think that was observed and experienced really early on by, I think, a majority of us as we would press on. It makes me think of the analogy of how diamonds are formed, right? This Under this pressure of really working this thing over. Oftentimes, it was uncomfortable, and yet every single person there leaned into that and stayed with it. It's like, almost, it's totally counter to our biology, is to move towards discomfort. We're all wired to, like, move towards comfort, and yet everybody stayed there at that edge. And that edge kept moving and expanding because we were all being stretched. And so it was challenging, and yet, I mean, you could almost see it. We were all feeling fatigue and still somewhat and still energized at the same time by this process. So um, that process of just working with all the other delegates, consulting our ICC, talking to other folks, especially when we're outside of session, I think really helped us um, feel encouraged. Every time we'd come across challenges, you'd have new insights come from these diverse perspectives, and going, oh my gosh, like, we'd feel the appreciation, the thanks for somebody else seeing something, because we'd be so focused in another area. And then somebody else would identify something, and we go, like, it would actually be a relief. Like, I'm so glad somebody else can see that because we're over here. And so that, feeling that benefit, the, um, the collective effort was palpable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is why I love this community so much. What aspect of the final constitution makes you especially proud, if you can pick one? And why do you think it will benefit the broader community?
That's a deep question. um, yeah, I think
Take your time.
yeah, the aspect of the final constitution that I am most proud of is not its particular parts, but the input that came from everyone. That's the only thing that really gives me confidence um, to proceed forward with where it is. I actually, when the votes were going around, I felt, as an alternate, sitting back, observing my delegate vote on behalf of our constituents and others voting on behalf of, representing the voice of their constituents and those who they were there to represent. I too felt represented by both the yeses and the nos, because I understood why. And there was um, that actually made me proud that both of those things were represented, that there were, I understood the reasons why, and I agreed with all of them. So this result of all of this work um, is ultimately what makes me proud. Not a particular or specific piece of the Constitution, but the way it came about. And I believe it benefits the broader community because they get to hear this experience from, 130 plus people who had this shared experience of working very hard and getting to um, understand more of that perspective, because the community is really large, and there is um, a lot of observing from the outsides without getting really involved, and it's easy to miss a lot of context of how many hours go into it. And so I think the benefit to the broader community comes from this ability to observe how many hours were broadcasted live, hear from so many community members about that perspective, about that experience, and then the call to action. This community needs to be more involved, even in small ways, but it is really important because there's no undo button. When we deliver this governance to the community, it is now ours. And understanding the significance of that, the is really profound, really powerful.
That's a really great answer. That's a great answer. How would you say your experience as a delegate influenced your perspective on a? You've already touched on this, but your perspective on global collaboration and governance.
That one's difficult. I'm not sure I have the ability to quite put that into words yet. There are moments that that is still actually unfolding for me on a regular basis, reflecting on this and continuing to see, of course, the ongoing conversation and the work that many of the delegates and alternates are continuing to do towards this moment where the document and any supporting documents or so forth become ratified on chain. There is, yeah, it's still forming. I don't even know if I can say much
That's
more
so
about that in addition or anything different than what I have shared already. Um, yeah, that one, to let that
that's
one
so
sit
fair. I completely
and simmer.
that I completely yeah, absolutely. That's so understandable. I'm sure you can answer this one. As we look into the future, do you have any advice that you would give to other communities who are considering similar initiatives?
Yes. I think there's a lot of lessons learned going forward. And, there was talk about doing a retrospective for both the Intersect Committee as well as community members on any level, gathering information, input from those who were there and experienced this process in order to, you know, uh, make better any future processes that follow. Um, One of the key things that I think from the start is delivering as much of this to the community, to the public as possible early on. A lot of the things that we felt like we were getting hooked on in the during the process there at the convention, our own processing of pieces was just related to new material that we couldn't see early on. Now, granted, I kind of shared this analogy with a few other folks because it resonated for me, knowing several people personally who do a lot of lapidary work. Sometimes you can set out with the best plan. You have a beautiful stone in front of you. You think you want to make certain cuts and you want to shape it in a particular way. And there are things that you don't see until you make a cut. And sometimes you discover something new. And so, granted, we were there and we were making new cuts to create and shape this gem or this stone. There were things that we wouldn't have been able to foresee until we made those cuts. Um, that being said, I think portions of that and parts of that process, a lot of things around semantics and some of the wording, give that if that had been more available, similar to maybe SIP 1694 early on, the community can self-organize around a lot of those pieces and may not have required so much of a formally guided process, and that could have maybe lightened some of that burden that we felt um, pressed into those days. So I think keeping it as public as possible, finding new ways to um, garner more of that participation and input early on. And maybe the ways we have now are suffice, such as the GitHub and where SIP 1694 was placed. Those types of things can work. And I imagine we'll innovate and find some new ways too that invite more participation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you were so right. That is a great answer. Fletcher, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. This has been really insightful for me, and I'm so excited for the wider community to be able to hear from you and hear your perspective. I think it is very valuable. I really, really appreciate your time. It was
Thank you.
great meeting you also. Thank
Yeah,
you.
likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.